No one saw them coming. There had been no signal, no distortion in space, no warning from the countless satellites watching the skies. One moment, Earth orbited in its quiet routine. The next, the stars vanished. At 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, astronomers across the globe began reporting the same impossible anomaly. Entire constellations were gone. Not obscured, not dimmed, gone. In their place hung something vast and silent, objects so large they blotted out the heavens themselves. Within minutes, panic rippled through every major observatory. Within 10, world governments were alerted. Within 30, every screen on Earth, phones, televisions, billboards, aircraft displays, flickered at once. Then the message came. It did not arrive in any known language, yet every human understood it perfectly. The words bypassed translation, bypassed logic, and settled directly into the mind like a command carved into instinct. "We are the Galactic Council." The voice was neither loud nor soft. It carried no anger, no warmth, only absolute certainty. "Your species has been observed. Your world has been evaluated." Across Earth, cities froze. Highways clogged as drivers stopped mid-lane. Air traffic controllers sat motionless, listening. Soldiers gripped weapons that suddenly felt meaningless. Above them, the fleet revealed itself. Ships, if they could even be called that, shifted into visibility like shadows peeling away from reality. They were not uniform. Some were vast geometric constructs, others organic and curved, like living creatures of metal and light. They surrounded Earth completely, a silent cage spanning orbit to horizon. "You have reached the threshold of relevance." In New York, crowds gathered in the streets, staring upward. In Islamabad, families huddled around flickering screens. In Tokyo, trains halted mid-track as passengers looked to the sky. No one spoke. No one dared. "By decree of the Council, you will submit to integration." A pause followed, not for effect, but for inevitability. "Your governments will dissolve. Your resources will be catalogued. Your species will be repurposed in accordance with your biological and cognitive utility." The meaning was unmistakable. This was not diplomacy. This was ownership. In military command centers across the world, generals and strategists scrambled to respond. Nuclear arsenals were placed on alert. Defense systems powered up. But even as protocols activated, a single truth became painfully clear. None of it mattered. The fleet above them was not an army. It was a verdict. Compliance ensures survival. For a brief moment, the message softened, not with mercy, but with calculation. Resistance ensures extinction. Then, for the first time, a deadline was given. You have one rotation of your planet to decide. 24 hours. That was all humanity was worth. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. No explosions. No attacks. Just the quiet presence of something far beyond comprehension, waiting, watching, judging. And down on Earth, something unexpected began to happen. Not chaos, not surrender, but connection. Across borders, across languages, across every line that had ever divided them, humanity began to speak as one. Leaders reached out to rivals. Enemies paused their conflicts. For the first time in history, the entire species faced the same horizon. And instead of breaking, it held. Somewhere, in a quiet room filled with the glow of too many screens, a simple question was asked, one that no human had ever needed to answer before. Do we kneel, or do we stand? The world did not sleep. For 24 hours, Earth held its breath. Emergency summits blurred into one another as leaders from every nation gathered, some in fortified bunkers, others through encrypted channels that flickered under the strain of unknown interference. Old rivalries, once carved in stone, dissolved under a single, crushing reality. There was no us and them anymore. There was only humanity. Military analysts ran simulations until their systems overheated. Every outcome ended the same way: annihilation. The alien fleet outmatched humanity in every measurable category: firepower, mobility, technology. Even their mere presence in orbit suggested a level of advancement centuries, perhaps millennia, beyond human understanding. Surrender, some argued, was survival. Integration could mean preservation of the species, even if it meant losing everything that defined it. Others disagreed, because the message hadn't offered coexistence. It had offered ownership. Across the planet, something deeper than fear began to take hold. It wasn't loud. It wasn't organized. It spread quietly, through conversations, through broadcasts, through millions of people asking the same question in different words. If we survive like this, are we still human? In cities and villages alike, people stepped outside and looked up. The sky was still crowded with impossible shapes, their silhouettes unmoving, patient, waiting for an answer they believed was inevitable. But humanity had never been predictable. In a joint broadcast seen by nearly every living person, a single representative finally spoke, not as a president, not as a prime minister, but as a voice chosen by necessity. Behind them stood no flags, no symbols, only Earth, suspended in quiet defiance. "We have received your terms," the speaker began, their voice steady despite the weight of history pressing down on every word. A pause. Around the world, billions listened. "We understand the consequences. In orbit, the fleet did not move. We choose not to submit." There it was. Simple. Final. Human. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the sky changed. The alien ships shifted, not aggressively, not chaotically, but with precise, mechanical intent. Massive structures rotated, their surfaces unfolding like blades of light. Energy gathered at points too bright to look at directly. The response came instantly, flooding every mind once again. Non-compliance confirmed. The voice was unchanged. No anger, no frustration, just confirmation. Commencing corrective demonstration. Across Earth, defense systems activated. Fighter jets scrambled into the sky. Missile batteries locked onto targets they couldn't truly comprehend. Fleets moved into position, commanders issuing orders they knew would likely be their last. Still, they acted, because that was what humans did. They tried. The first strike didn't come as a barrage. It came as a single beam. A column of light descended from one of the massive vessels, cutting through the atmosphere without resistance. It struck the ocean far from any coast, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the water vanished. Not displaced. Not vaporized. Gone. A perfect circular void carved into the sea, miles wide and impossibly deep, as if a piece of the planet had been erased from existence itself. The surrounding water rushed inward, collapsing with a force that sent shock waves across continents. Tsunami warnings triggered instantly. Seismic monitors screamed. And the message followed. This is restraint. Silence. Next will not be. The meaning was clear. This had been mercy, a warning written in the language of power. But on Earth, amid the rising panic and the undeniable terror, something else held firm. Not confidence, not hope, but resolve. Humanity had seen the cost of defiance, and still, it did not kneel. The second strike never came, not immediately, and that was the Council's first mistake. They had expected collapse, panic, division, desperation, a species turning on itself in the face of inevitable extinction. It was the pattern repeated across 1,000 worlds, resistance followed by fracture, fracture followed by surrender. But Earth did not fracture. It adapted. Within hours of the ocean strike, humanity shifted from shock to motion, not blindly, not chaotically, but with a clarity forged under pressure. Every major power redirected its full attention upward, not at each other, but at the fleet that loomed like a second sky. Data flooded across networks. Every telescope, satellite, and sensor was repurposed. Civilian infrastructure became military overnight. Private companies opened their systems. Rival nations shared intelligence without hesitation, because for the first time, there were no secrets left worth keeping. The alien fleet was studied in obsessive detail. Patterns began to emerge, not in their design, which was incomprehensible, but in their behavior. The ships held formation with mathematical precision. Energy fluctuations followed cycles. Communication pulses, though indecipherable, carried rhythm. They were not chaotic. They were systematic, predictable, and predictability was something humans understood. Deep beneath mountains, in hardened bunkers and hidden labs, scientists worked without rest. Physicists tore apart the data from the ocean strike, analyzing the energy signature that had erased a piece of the planet. Engineers proposed impossible countermeasures. Most failed. Some didn't. Fragments of alien signals, captured in the initial broadcast, revealed something unexpected. Structure. Not language, but logic. A framework. Enough to begin building models, crude at first, but improving by the hour. Humanity could not match the Council's technology, but it could learn from it. And humans were very, very good at learning. In orbit, the Council watched. They observed increased activity, launches, transmissions, coordinated movements, but interpreted it as desperation. A primitive species exhausting its final options before submission. They did not see the shift. They did not understand it, because they had never encountered it before. The first human countermeasure wasn't a weapon. It was interference. A network of satellites, some military, many civilian, began transmitting synchronized bursts of noise directly at the alien fleet. At first glance, it was meaningless, static, random. But it wasn't random. It was adaptive. Each burst adjusted based on the fleet's responses, probing for disruption points. It took minutes to notice the effect, subtle at first, barely measurable. Then one of the smaller ships drifted, only slightly, a fraction of a degree, but in a formation defined by perfection. It was a flaw. On Earth, buried in a command center filled with exhausted minds and glowing screens, someone whispered the word no one had dared to say yet. Again. The signals intensified, refined, targeted, and this time the reaction was undeniable. Several ships shifted out of alignment, their energy signatures flickering, not failing, but destabilizing. The fleet corrected quickly, restoring order within seconds. But it had happened. Humanity had touched them. For the first time since their arrival, the Council responded with something new. Not a threat, Not a command, but attention. Anomaly detected. The voice spread across the planet once more, unchanged, but now something beneath it had shifted. Not emotion. Not yet. But awareness. On Earth, there was no cheering, no celebration. Just a quiet, electric understanding spreading through every command center, every lab, every screen. They weren't winning. They weren't even close. But they had proven something far more dangerous. The Council was not untouchable, and humans had just begun to fight. The Council adapted quickly. They had to. For the first time in their long history, a pre-integration species had not only resisted, but interfered. The disruption was minor, contained within seconds, but its existence alone was unacceptable. Imperfection was not tolerated. In orbit, the fleet shifted formations. What had once been a silent cage became something sharper, more deliberate. Ships repositioned into layered structures, their energy signatures stabilizing against further interference. Redundancies activated. Signal pathways hardened. They would not be touched again, or so they believed. On Earth, the window was already closing. Humanity knew it. The interference had worked, but only briefly. The Council was learning now, just as humans were. The next opportunity wouldn't come from repeating the same tactic. It would come from escalation. Deep within a coalition command center, one that no longer belonged to any single nation, a plan took shape. It was reckless. It was incomplete. And by every traditional measure of warfare, it was impossible, which made it perfect. Humanity didn't need to destroy the fleet. It only needed to prove that it could. The target was chosen carefully, one of the smaller Council vessels, positioned along the outer edge of the formation. Still massive by human standards, but isolated enough to matter. It was a node, part of a larger network. Disrupt it, even briefly, and the effect could ripple across the entire formation. The problem was distance and survival. No human craft had ever approached something like that and returned. The energy shielding alone would vaporize anything that got too close. Conventional weapons wouldn't penetrate it. So humanity chose something unconventional. They stopped thinking like soldiers and started thinking like humans. A handful of experimental spacecraft, never meant for combat, were refitted in hours. Civilian engines pushed beyond safety limits. Military guidance systems patched together with half-tested algorithms. And at the core of each vessel, a payload built from everything they had learned in the last 24 hours. Not a bomb. A disruption. A focused, adaptive burst designed to destabilize the alien ship systems from the inside out, if it could get close enough. It was a one-way mission. No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. The volunteers came anyway. Pilots from every corner of the world. Different languages. Different flags. No hesitation. Because for the first time, the line they were crossing wasn't for a country. It was for all of them. The launch was silent. No speeches. No countdown broadcast to the world. Just a handful of ships rising into the sky, vanishing into the shadow of something far greater. The Council noticed. Of course they did. Unauthorized approach detected. The response was immediate. Defensive systems activated across the targeted vessel. Energy fields intensified, warping the space around it. Intercept patterns formed, precise and overwhelming. To the Council, this was correction. Routine. Predictable. The human ships did not retreat. They accelerated. One was lost almost instantly, erased before it even registered impact. Another veered off course, systems failing under the strain. A third pushed forward, breaking through layers of interference by sheer force of will and flawed human engineering. It shouldn't have worked. It wasn't supposed to. But it did. The lead craft crossed the threshold. Close enough. For a single second, everything aligned. The payload triggered. There was no explosion. No fire. Just a pulse. Silent. Invisible. And devastating. The alien vessel faltered. Its perfect structure rippled, like glass under pressure. Energy cascades flickered across its surface, patterns breaking, reforming, then breaking again. For the first time, the ship did not respond instantly. It hesitated. Across the fleet, formation integrity wavered. Not collapse, but disruption. And that was enough. On Earth, every screen lit up with the same data. Every system, every analyst, every watching human saw it at once. Proof. Not hope. Not theory. Proof. The Council was not infallible. For the first time since their arrival, the voice returned, not as a declaration, but as something colder, sharper. Escalation acknowledged. A pause. Longer than before. Measured. Reclassification in progress. And for the first time, humanity wasn't being processed as a resource. It was being recognized as a threat. The Council did not strike back immediately, and that was how humanity knew it had changed everything. For the first time since their arrival, the fleet above Earth was not acting. It was thinking. Across the massive formation, ships shifted, not into attack positions, but into something far more complex. Patterns emerged and dissolved. Energy signatures fluctuated in ways no human system could fully interpret. The perfect stillness that had once defined them was gone, replaced by calculation. On Earth, no one mistook it for hesitation. This was evaluation. Humanity had crossed a line no species had crossed before, not by matching the Council's power, but by disrupting its certainty. The flawless machine of galactic order had encountered something it had no framework for. Resistance. That did not break. Adaptation. That did not stop. And sacrifice. That could not be predicted. In command centers around the world, anticipation hung thick in the air. Every defense system remained active. Every eye stayed fixed on the sky. They knew what could come next. Total annihilation. And yet, no one spoke of surrender anymore. That option had died the moment the first human ship crossed into orbit. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. And finally, the message returned. But this time, it was different. It still reached every mind, still carried that same impossible clarity, but something beneath it had shifted. Not emotion, but weight. Reclassification complete. A pause followed, long enough for the entire planet to feel it. Humanity. Designation revised. Across Earth, billions listened in silence. Status. Non-compliant. Adaptive. Unstable. The words were not insults. They were assessments. And then, for the first time since the beginning, the Council did something unprecedented. Integration directive. Suspended. The reaction on Earth was immediate, but not loud, not chaotic. Just a collective exhale, as if the planet itself had been holding its breath. Suspended. Not cancelled. But not enforced. It was space. The Council continued. Further engagement risks disproportionate resource expenditure. To them, it was a calculation. To humanity, it was survival. But the message was not over. Provisional outcome, negotiation. That word echoed differently. It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was something no species had ever earned from the Council before. A choice. In orbit, the fleet began to change. Not retreating, but loosening. The suffocating cage around Earth opened, just enough to no longer feel like a blade at the throat. For the first time in nearly 2 days, the stars returned. One by one, pinpricks of light reappeared in the night sky as the alien ships shifted position. The universe, vast and infinite, revealed itself again, and humanity stood beneath it, not conquered, not erased, still here. The cost had been high, lives lost, oceans scarred, fear carved into every memory of that day. But something greater had been forged in return. Unity, not the fragile kind built on convenience, but the unbreakable kind forged under extinction. The Council had come expecting submission. They had found defiance. They had come expecting obedience. They had found ingenuity. And now, they had found something they could not easily categorize. Humanity. The voice spoke one final time, quieter now, not weaker, but measured. You will be observed. A pause. You will be remembered. And then, after everything, you will not kneel. The transmission ended. The fleet remained, distant but present, no longer an executioner, but not yet an ally. Something else. Something new. And on Earth, as the first true night returned and the stars burned overhead, humanity looked up, not with fear, but with resolve. Because the galaxy had made a mistake. It had given them time. And humans were very good at using time.